Hi everyone. Um, Welcome back, and I hope that you all had a really great Easter weekend. Um, Moving on in science, today's going to be a pretty light day for you. Last week we took all week to talk about camouflage and how the color of the organism can help it blend into its environment better, either making it a better predator or prey. Today is just about any other type of adaptation that an organism can have that might make it better suited that isn't color. So just to remember, it's really important that you remember that mutations are random and that sometimes those adaptations um, or those mutations can become good. And that's when we call them adaptations. So sometimes random things happen that aren't good and they don't make the organism better suited, but they're more likely to die out, and we don't see that mutation move throughout the population. So we're just going to kind of talk about three other types, okay? So if you can get your notebook out, and I want you to just continue under where we were for activity 95, and I want you to write underneath there other types of adaptations. Okay, so there are three different types that we're going to talk about. The first one is structural or physical adaptation. So I'd like you to write this sentence and the examples beneath it. So structural or physical adaptations are any physical characteristic that would allow you to be more successful. So that includes the camouflage that we talked about, but it also includes things like horns. If you are a horned individual like the rhino in that picture, you're able better to defend yourself or to defend your families. Or if you are the predator, you're able to hunt or perhaps kill better if you have some type of horn. You could talk about fins. Fins give swimming animals the ability to move through currents and live in different environments so that they have the ability to move more efficiently. Armor. Armor are things like a turtle shell or a clam shell. It provides an extra special layer of protection. Turtles, when they're threatened, can hide their heads inside. The reptiles have very soft bodies, so having that armor is definitely an evolutionary advantage for those animals. Bright colors are another um, physical adaptation that can be really, really good. So when we're talking about flowers, the brightly colored flowers can attract the pollinators, which ensues that the flowers will keep reproducing. Some animals have very brightly colored bodies to either attract mates, it makes them prettier, so they attract their mates better, or they're actually able to warn their predators that maybe they're poisonous or something like that to keep them from being eaten, which would make that more successful for them. So those are just a few of the different examples of things. Anything on the body that physically makes you more likely to survive would fall under this category. The second type of adaptation that we haven't talked about is behavioral adaptations. So go ahead and jot down this definition and the examples. Behavioral adaptations are anything that the organism actually does. They're behaviors that make them more successful. So that could be living in a herd. Living in a herd like the elephants. I'm trying to think like a lot of your grazing animals like zebras and gazelles, they all stay in a herd, or sheep or even cattle. It gives them advantages to protect each other. It also allows them to share responsibility in helping with the young and making sure that if a parent is busy, that there is another that child or baby animal is not left unattended, so it's less likely to be preyed upon by another predator or adult. So herding is a really good it's a good characteristic behavior that allows the animals to do better. Socialization is really a benefit. I here's a picture of the socializing and of the apes down there. We know that they pick bugs off of each other. There's a hierarchy. Someone's in charge. There's leadership skills. The mom takes care of the young. So just setting up that community system is really helpful and a benefit to those animals as well. Traps, animals that are able to set traps, like a spider sets its web. Obviously, the web is a really, really good advantage to the spider. It allows them to kind of sit back and let their prey come to them. Um, and mimicry is a really cool one. So if this interests you at all, mimicry is a really neat adaptation worth looking up. I have the example here, and I always talk about this in class, of if anything flies by you that's yellow and black, you kind of get a little like scared, or it at least startles you. And that's because we associate that with an insect that bites and can sting us and it hurts. So a lot of other insects have adapted where they have that same coloring, and this is the only bee that would sting you. These other insects don't sting, but because of their coloring, they are able to ward off other predators and they're less likely to be eaten. So that coloring becomes a really beneficial adaptation for them. And we see that in snakes. There's a couple different kind of snakes even around here. I believe it's the milk snake and the coral snake look very similar. Milk snake is not poisonous. The coral snake is, and so when you see one, it's kind of scary. So that's an advantage for those animals as well, to look like something scarier than they are. And then the third type of adaptation is what we call physiological adaptations. It's something that their bodies do on their own, but it allows them to be better suited to their environment. So those examples are the fact that mammals can make milk. That's an advantage. Bodies that make venom or poison or are toxic in some way, that's a really good defense mechanism that allows animals to be better suited. Having thick fur, the fact that the polar bears grow thick fur is what allows them to live in those harsh climates. So not only does their color of their fur, if the polar bear had white fur but very little of it, sure, it would blend in, but it wouldn't be able to survive the temperatures. So we find that a lot of the animals that live in the Arctic environments have very thick furs, whereas animals that live in warmer climates have less fur. And so the ability of those bodies to grow the appropriate amount of fur is an advantage, an adaptation. And then blubber. So animals also like the walrus down there or the polar bear, you could talk about whales. It allows them to, the animals that make more of that are able to live in a colder climate, which is unique to them. Talking about mammals for a second, the ability to feed your young and not have to hunt for your food for the babies is a really big adaptation that increases the chance of those mammals' survival, especially the babies. The mom can stay with the babies and feed them really good food, and the mom can sustain that for quite some time with smaller amounts of food so that she can stay with the babies a little bit longer and make sure that they're safe. So those are just some other, and those aren't the only ones, but those are some of the other major adaptations that are really helpful to the success of different species. And, there are probably animals born in any species that don't maybe have the best versions of those traits. And maybe they have a mutation that maybe they don't grow enough fur, or maybe they have a mutation where they don't make the poison they're supposed to, and then those individuals die out and they don't pass those traits on. And the animals that were born with these great adaptations are the ones that survive and reproduce. So I have a little 4-minute video. It's just quick, 4 minutes, but it kind of goes through and shows you some of those adaptations. And I really think it's worth your while. We're not going to do an exit ticket today. I'll wheel that in to the lessons later in the week. But I just really wanted to start out the week by reviewing and then having you think about some of the other characteristics and traits that animals have and plants that make them more successful in their environment. So do me a favor, once you're done with your notes, go ahead and flip over and click in the classroom, click on the other YouTube video for the video that is called Types of Adaptations. And I will see you tomorrow. Thanks, guys.